Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra. I just want to share with you these headlines and then do my media criticism about climate change coverage. CBS News, at least 7 killed after powerful storm front. Tornadoes slam south. January 12th of 2023. National Public Radio. Alabama's governor issues a state of emergency for counties hit by tornadoes. January 13th of 2023. Morning Edition. Now, I'm citing these two because a lot of people feel like NPR, CBS, maybe they're liberal or mainstream news, and they're not deniers, like they're not going to host deniers like Fox News has in the past, or at least that's what's claimed by Public Citizen, and I'd imagine One America News or Newsmax or those type of organizations, but they de-emphasize the climate change story. They don't emphasize the simple climate change mechanisms that are driving this, what looks like the beginning of an unraveling of our climate system. And as you probably know by now, I believe there's 2 reasons at play here. One's the power and influence of the fossil fuel petrochemical industries. That's, I believe, definitely the case at Fox, but I believe also the case at places like CBS and elsewhere, just even if only through advertising or interlocking boards of directors or that type of thing. And another reason is that science is based on probability, and other than Michael Mann and some other climate scientists, it might be tough to find one to come on the air and just put things simply. But now, one reason I wanted to cite that NPR article was because the host there he somehow drew, like, to make his show more interesting, I guess, he drew a connection with Selma, Alabama, which got struck by one of the tornadoes. He drew an interesting, connection or juxtaposition with Selma, Alabama, how that it got hit by a tornado, but it's also was a historic home of the civil rights movement. Now, the reason why I want to highlight that is because, even if people know nothing about climate change, because our education system really ignores it. And that's 2 reasons in that. One, the way the thinking and that dominates the educators, and then which is that they are not teaching people facts, but they're teaching people how to think or how to learn. That's what they think they're doing. But another factor is that fossil fuel petrochemical industry also has influence in our education system, and that's been shown there was a book called Miseducation, where the author showed how the fossil fuel industry elements of it affected the Texas book publishing industry, and then Texas, because it's such a major purchaser of textbooks, is going to affect education throughout the country. At least that was one of the effects it has on it. You still should know, if you're an American, that and maybe even other parts of the world as well, that tornadoes hitting the old Dixieland South, that doesn't seem normal to me. But yet it's just portrayed as, tornadoes hit the South. So let's just think about our popular imagination of the South. You've got those freedom marches, those civil rights protests during the Martin Luther King era that were mentioned. Well, we didn't have freedom marchers in Selma and tornadoes. Well, the whole horrors of Jim Crow, there wasn't horrors of Jim Crow, sharecroppers, and tornadoes. Preceding that, the institution of slavery and the plantations, there wasn't these plantation slaveholdings with tornadoes rampaging through. Or other popular, the South in popular memory through Mark Twain, or even the Disney movie Song of the South with Uncle Remus and Brer Rabbit, again, not accompanied by tornadoes. So I just want to share with you 2 citations that really any of these reporters could just be pop them into their stories, but they're choosing not to. One, Yale Climate Connections, great simple headline. Climate change and tornadoes, any connection? As greenhouse gases shuffle the atmospheric deck, where and when twisters happen is changing. By BOB HENSON, July 19th of 2021. Okay, so that heating atmosphere is changing where tornadoes happen, like it's changing everything. That should be mentioned. From Yale 360, a great article they had about how climate change or the heating planet is really changing a lot of things. Well, one, they focused about Tornado Alley moving eastward. And here, let me just read you a couple parts from that. Hotspots for tornado formation in the U.S. have shifted east 500 miles since the mid-1980s, along with shifts in temperature. And the source, Journal of Applied Meteorology and Climatology of 2016. Okay, so this is going back to 2016. Things are probably more changed as everything's hotter, and I've shown you plenty of times too that everything's hotter right at NASA, and they attribute that to a process set in motion by the excessive burning of fossil fuels going back to the start of the Industrial Revolution, with warnings all along ignored. That part I'm adding in. Now back to this thing about everybody ignoring their own memories and their own recollections, back from that Yale Environment 360 article, the author of The Wizard of Oz likely chose Kansas for the book's setting for a reason. It was smack dab in the middle of Tornado Alley. The stretch from South Dakota to Texas that's infamous for destructive storms. Just do that folksy narrator voice here. But things are changing. Research shows that tornadoes are now more likely to hit homes some 500 miles to the east in southern states, including Tennessee and Alabama. Tennessee and Alabama more likely to hit there than it used to be. Yet, when these twisters hit, no one mentions that. Back to the climate change mechanisms of it, the probability, which is why sometimes it's hard to get a scientist to come on and explain this because it's really all based on probability, but that's enough. We could just be adding in that, hey, this stuff makes it more likely. The general link between weather and tornadoes is fairly well established. Tornadoes need several things to form, including warm, wet, buoyant air, and high wind shear. As the 100th meridian moves eastward, it is pushing drier conditions further east, and with it, Tornado Alley. So hey, I hope you found this helpful if you're suffering from tornadoes now in an area that didn't used to be, because remember, this changing climate is catching a lot of people off guard, and it really says this is what our political priorities should be. It's how we're going to prepare for this increasing disasters, how we're going to mitigate and get away from fossil fuels, get towards a greener, healthier, less destructive economy, really is at the heart of this. And that's why it's not talked about, because doing that is going to upend some industries that are already dominant, business interests that are already dominant, and are dominant in our media and dominant in our political and our politics, especially the fossil fuel industry, which is more dominant, much more dominant within the Republican Party than it is within the Democratic Party. Not to say the Democrats aren't dominated by other industries, but fossil fuels, that influence is much weaker. Well, hey, I hope you found this analysis helpful and informative, and if you did, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel. You click that notification bell, you're liking, you're commenting. Constructive criticism always welcome. I'm just curious what you like, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of. And as always, until next time, again, thank you, Bella Grissi and Environmental Coffee House, for donating to this show at Patreon. This is a heck of a lot of work, very time consuming. And as always, until next time, peace be with you.